Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. So this is where we spend about the next hour going through your hobby cheating questions. So if you've got any questions, you put them in the chat over here. I never know which side it's on. So it's on one of these sides. There's a little comments chat thing you can put over there. And I decided to do this one later in the day. That was because frankly, because I was traveling up until the weekend and traveling last week, and it's been very busy. And I wanted to go see Captain Marvel, so there you go. I got to take a couple hours off from just sitting at this desk sometimes. But don't worry, I'm back faithfully now in my chair where I will remain, never to leave again. But I thought we'd take some time here to discuss all your hobby cheating questions. So the idea here is that I'm going to sit here for about an hour. You're going to ask me some hobby cheating questions, and I'm going to do the best I can to answer it in as detailed a fashion as I possibly can. It's a good chance, obviously, as part of the hobby cheating series. I try to do individual topics. As you know, I focus more on techniques and sort of thought about the hobby and stuff like that rather than painting a mini. And a lot of people ask me to cover specific stuff, and I keep a running list, but admittedly, I can only do one video a week. So sometimes some of those can take a little while. So this is a chance to kind of get ahead of the curve there. So good to see all of you. See some people asking questions in the chat already, so that's great. I'm happy to see all of you too. Hello, everybody who doesn't normally get a chance to catch it live. I never know, I'm cognizant of what time it is from, I'm in the Eastern time zone in the US. So, right now it's 5 p.m. And so I'm cognizant of West Coast time and the time in Europe, in the UK. But I honestly, it could be the year 2023 on the other side of the planet. I just have no clue. I do not understand beyond that. So hopefully this is a good time. I try to vary these so that more people can watch. All right. So let's start asking some questions. So here we go. All right, Crazy Gamer says, I have a master's airbrush, but I wanted to upgrade. What do you recommend? Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of good airbrush brands out there. We should talk for a moment about what makes a good airbrush brand. Master's a great airbrush to start with. It's a simple, like your G22, your G23, the thing you get in the kit. It is the car you buy when you're 16. It's easy to, if you beat it up, you break it. It's durable, that kind of stuff. Better airbrushes have more finely machined parts that fit together more smoothly, allow less chance for error. Basically, they're just a tighter, smoother, more precise mechanism. Your airbrush, if there's even the smallest hole where air can pass where it's not supposed to, big problems arise. So what does that mean? Where do you go? Well, there's plenty of good brands out there. I know lots of people like Badger. I've never really used them, but I know that they are a perfectly fine airbrush. They will require a different connector on the bottom into your hose, so you have to be aware of that. I personally used, when I went from my master airbrush to up, I used an Iwata HPCS. And it's still to this day, you can see I have it over here because it's installed dirty because I was just using it earlier today. Haven't cleaned it yet. The Iwata HPCS has been sort of my workhorse for a long time. The Grex GX3 and GX2, I like both of those. For my fine detail work, I have an Infinity CR Plus, which is, this is truly a really, really nice airbrush that costs a lot of money and you don't necessarily need to go this far. But this thing has sort of all the bells and whistles and is extremely smooth in all its fine controls and stuff like that. So, any of those are a good step up. If I was going to tell you to, what the next step up for you to take is from the master, honestly, I'd say do the same thing I did. By the way, it's the same thing I got Tom onto as well, which is the Iwata HPCS. It's been a workhorse brush for me for years. I like it. It's easy to take apart. I do really like the GX3 again at that sort of next price point up. They're both about, $100 to $130, something like that. The USD, I don't know what that translates to around the world, but perfectly fine. Okay. So, Dark Dust. Hey, Vince, I'm planning on following your guide for cold white to paint my Night Haunt. Trying to take some inspiration from Japanese Yuri ghosts, primarily wearing white. Would it be a good fit? I don't know what that is. Let me look. I'm going to type this in right now. Yuri ghosts. Okay. Oh, neat. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that'd be great. I see. Oh, so like, is like the Ring Girl like a version of one of these things? Okay. The same thing comes up in the images. I don't know if it's the same or not. But yeah, I think that'd be a great fit. Yeah, that guide for cold white should do you well. Exactly that. Yes. I think that's exactly how I would do it. You could do it through airbrush. You could do it through, through the technique I do there with the brush or both, and that'd be fine. Brighton says, do you have any tips, special processes for painting something that you should have sub-assembled? Okay, got it. So you should have sub-assembled it, but you didn't, is your question. Okay, and so now what? Yeah, sure. I mean, the answer is if you've already gone down that road, don't do it again in the future. But my answer is enhance your contrast and shadows. That is to say, like, make some of those hidden parts that are harder to reach darker. Like, leave them darker. So they're more naturally hidden, especially if this is like for an army or something for tabletop, like, and you're not trying to do this for some painting competition. Like, leave those hidden parts just very dark. Try to get like, dark blue, black paint in there or something like that. Really jam it up in there and paint those hidden recessed areas first. Then once you paint sort of a higher contrast on everything else, you won't really notice. The shadows will just get hidden. In the same way, you're not really trying to look under my collar right here, like, and see this area where my finger just went into, right? Because it's hidden away in shadow. So just hide your deeper shadows. And I think that's probably the best way. So that way you just don't have to kind of worry about the detail. All right. Michael Anderson, what techniques do I use to create non-metallic metal with colors other than gold, silver, or copper? Like blues, greens, reds, purples. Oh, so you want to do like colored non-metallic metal? It's all the same technique. So like if you're not trying to replicate a real metal, replicating real metals is the hardest because human beings have natural, like, predisposed subconscious biases about how these things look, right? That is to say, like, I have seen gold in my life or copper or steel. I've seen them a lot every day when I just walk around. That door handle back there right in the frame is like some kind of fake, goldy brass or something, right? I mean, it's not really, obviously, it's whatever cheap plastic they've sprayed with that. But like the point is every day I encounter things that are either that or meant to act like that. When you get into other colors, it's the same trick. It just needs to go from black to white, or in the simplest terms, from extremely dark to extremely light. So like if I were going to do, you see like Flame On Miniatures does this all the time. Like he runs these extremely high contrast paint jobs. And what it means is usually you're just taking the shadow color down to some reflective dark, like a Payne's gray or a true black, depending on what we're talking about. You run up through the mid-tone and then you run to a sharp white highlight and you make sure that there's edges. Like in general, it needs to act like metal. So like my best advice would be if you've really understood non-metallic steel, if you're very confident with non-metallic steel, then you can do any other colored metallic because non-metallic steel is just gray and maybe blue or brown. That's it. It's just that color. Like you're just swapping the gray for red or something else, right? In simplest terms. Gold and copper and bronze are tougher because they have these very strange properties and very exact, weird colors you're trying to match. Like that is to say, we don't make matte paint colors that look exactly like the broad spectrum of colors that those tend to be. So you have to really have these interesting sort of mixes and stuff. Okay. John says he wants to sign up for the airbrush class in Azusa, California. What is the cutoff date? I don't know. That one's not being taught by me, but I think as long as it's not like this weekend, or even if it was, well, you know, if it's this weekend, you're too late. But like as long as it's next weekend, I think you'd be fine. If you just reach out through the link, that you can get signed up. They'll generally let people join at a pretty last minute. Cat's pretty good about getting people into the fold last minute. If you're curious about the classes that either I'm teaching or CK Studios, the studios that I work with, are teaching, the link is down in the description. You can go and look at the full list of classes and who's teaching. That's right there on the main page. Okay. Oh, just jumped a whole bunch. Okay. Hey Vince, how would you airbrush black power armor for Death Company, Death Watch, Black Legion? Would you use a Zenithal highlight or different colors for a highlight? No, I'd still do a Zenithal. I do black in a very specific way in this regard, and I don't. My style is not the GW style, but you could integrate some of what they do into it. They have like this edge and edge highlighting on things like the Black Legion, which I do not understand. It's like I don't mind edge highlighting, like they use it quite heavily. I'm fine with it. I get it as an artistic expression. When they start doing edges in edges, where there's like a second edge inside the brocade of that like edge of the power armor, I don't know what's going on there. Now that being said, sure, I Zenithal it. I'll tell you exactly what I do. Here you go. You ready? Okay. Zenithal the power armor, just like normal. Then I take a couple drops of Payne's Gray mixed with a couple drops of black ink, and I thin it way down. Way stupid, super down. Crazy down. Okay? Very thin. And I'm using FW black ink, which is really strong. So you got to thin it way down. Have I said this enough? Okay, great. And then what I do is I pull in the direction of the shadow. Very light touch, very light spray, and I glaze with the airbrush down toward the shadow. I do a glaze, let it dry, see how dark it made. Do a glaze, let it dry, see how dark it was. Rinse, repeat. It's pretty easy. It's the easiest way I found to do that kind of thing for armor. If you want to go back in, then you can add things like a little white sort of dot highlight like they have, where they have these little light spots that have blue around them. You know, you could do that by just like putting a little dot of white paint and then taking some blue white and kind of just lightly circling it with your airbrush or something. Okay, Mickey R. Hey, Vince, if you're speed painting up an army for tournament use, if you want max painting points for the most common rubrics, what would you suggest spending the most time on? Bases, faces, banners, and shields. Always. Easy. So it's the old standard. Bases, faces, banners, and shields. That's what people look at. So that's what I would suggest you spend the time on. That being, I mean, I don't speed paint armies for tournament, but I understand your question. You know, my best advice is most time painting rubrics want to see things like blending. They want to see things like, you know, obviously you have your sort of min color usage, but you know, they want to see things like more advanced techniques. They want to see detailed bases. They want to see freehand somewhere. They want to see conversions or whatever, you know, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different ways. I'm not a fan of painting rubrics, by the way. At least not how they're often implemented. But that being said, bases, faces, banners, and shields. Make those things look nice. Make those things look good. Put in the time on them. Make sure you do freehand on your banners and stuff, and you know, make your shields look good and stuff like that. If you've got them, if you're an army that has those, because those tend to take up the majority of what you see. Like if a model is standing there with a shield in front of it, you're going to see its face, its shield, and its base. All right. If, by the way, if you don't have shields on them, then the weapon is my answer. Swap it for the other big thing in their hand. Felipe, how would you paint D&D Dark Elf Drow skin? Yeah, this has been on my list for a long time. Drow skin's really tricky because it is very black, like onyx black, but it comes to like extremely sharp highlights in the like gray blue spectrum. And that's probably how I would paint it. Like I would grab some mix of black and probably a couple deep flesh tones, and then pull a little blue into them and a little gray, and sort of use that for the normal highlight areas, the T-zone of the face, cheeks, stuff like that, chin, T. And bring that up to the highlight through there. Just mixing in a little bit of flesh as your actual way to lighten up the dark color. And then the gray and the blue are just to control out the warmth of it. But still, you want a little bit of it in there. It's probably a video I need to do at some point in time. I know there's like Drow minis now. I should just go like buy one of the Nolzur's Drow minis and do that as an example. I'll see if I can return to it. It's been on my list for a long time. I've never had much of a reason to do that kind of onyx skin tone. FS. Hey Vince, a few weeks ago you mentioned that you're going to give seminars in England. Okay. Yes, I am. And yes, we're finalizing it. I expect the seats, I expect them to be available this week. I actually was just on a phone call last night where we finalized some last details of it and what we're doing. So I would expect this week it will be up. You didn't miss anything. It'll be the week before Warhammer Fest. There'll be 2 classes actually. That Saturday and Sunday, and then that Monday and Tuesday in more like the evening time. So there you go. You didn't miss anything. That link will work. I'll tweet it out and stuff when it goes live. Trust me, I'll make sure. So just, if you're following me on any of the socials or whatever, Insta or Twitter or whatever, I'll share it. I'll mention it on the show, all that kind of stuff. Kelly, Vince, what is your Vallejo metallic gold recipe? Don't like the gold out of the pot. What do you mix in? So the question here is on Vallejo metal color. I do generally 3 drops of gold to 1 drop of copper. Pretty straightforward. The gold is green, yellow. The copper is red, yellow. Green plus red make brown. The more even you mix them, they're meant to cut each other. Like there's a cleverness to the way they were designed. They're meant to be intermixed. So like the red is so strong that 1 drop of it will more or less kill the green and warm up into a more brown sepia tone. And you'll get a beautiful rich gold. Like all that you see on my knights and stuff, that's all that exact ratio. And then, with my standard shading applied over it. Okay. James Clark. Oh, well, thank you. He says he's been in the hobby for a long time, found the stuff's been catching up. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much. I hope it's all helpful. Zach. Hey, Vince, can you recommend a good matte black for an airbrush? I'm having clogging issues, have tried excessive thinning. It still gets clogged really fast. Thanks again for your videos. Are awesome. Okay. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you want like really super hyper matte, I mean, honestly, like, so I'll give you 2 answers, one of which is easier than the other. So Vallejo Model Air black, just straight black. It's not completely matte. There's a little bit of satin to it, but it's smooth. I've never had any issues with this clogging straight out of the pot. Obviously, let me say it this way. I always use thinner. Nothing goes through the airbrush without thinner. Nothing. And the thinner always goes in first. So before you put any paint into your airbrush, if you're going to be a bad person like I am and you mix in the cup, then you need to have the thinner in first. Always put the thinner in first. Put the thinner in first. The thinner goes in before the paint. What goes in first? The thinner, then the paint. Why do we do that? Well, because there is a big open hole out towards the tip where liquid will flow into, because liquid likes to fill all available open space. And if you put the paint in first, it goes down in the tip and gets stuck in there. And then you put your thinner in and you mix it around. And interestingly, it's not mixing anything in the tip. And even if you backflow it, by that point, it's already stuck down in there. And so you encourage tip dry. So a couple drops of thinner and then this. You'll have a little bit of satin. Now, if you want something super matte, you have to thin it a little more. It takes a little more work. But the Pro Acryl Coal Black is quite a great matte color. It's like it's so matte, it looks semi-gray. And that's because it's completely matte. Like, the more matte black is, the more gray it will look, usually, which is weird, but that's the nature of the thing. So, like, yeah. Glossy black is the darkest black. I mean, if you've got a black coat, get it wet. Which part looks darker? The dry part or the wet part? The wet part will look darker because the wet is somewhat shiny. Glossy things just look darker. It's just, I'll openly admit I don't know the science of it, but I know it's true. Would oil washes work? What Thomas Haffenden asked, would oil washes work well for painting Tyranid flesh? Probably. Because they do tend to have a lot of little like recessed things where their plates attached and stuff. I mean, I like oil washes, period. I don't know why they wouldn't. I think they'd be pretty good. They have a lot of large flat armor panels, which is what you don't want to get washes on because then you get coffee staining. But yeah, an oil wash would be great because then you'd have a chance to like just wipe that down. So I think that'd be a great answer. Yeah. Okay. Can you explain the War Colors flesh set and how it works together? David Carter asks. Yes, I swear to you, I will have a video on that coming soon. I've said that for so long now, but I kept having other videos that got up, and it's not going to be the next one either because I know what the next one is, and it's not that. We're going to talk about more rat related things here. But yeah, sure. In its simplest form, it's this: the flesh. What's the number? 3 is really your base flesh. And then from that, you mix in everything else to make. So your shadows are made by mixing in flesh 5. Your highlights are made by mixing in flesh 1. And your pink transitions to smooth between everything are made by using flesh 4, which is like the hyper pink color. You use that to warm the cheeks, to warm like elbows and recessed areas in the arm and hands. See how much pink is on my hands? Like, this is what that's for, right? And then the transparent flesh tone is there to then smooth all of that out. So I will say there is one missing color from the flesh set, which is your deepest shadow. Like, there's no ultra deep shadow in that set. And for that, you can use a host of different things. You can use like War Colors, brown 5 works, or a deep purple. I actually like using scale 75 black leather. That's my jam for deep flesh shadows because it's got a little bit of purple, a little bit of red, a little bit of brown. But then I just use that for like the deepest shadows, right? But that's in its simplest form. It's your you're using the pink only as an expression of drawing out where blood is: noses, cheeks, lips, hands, joints. And beyond that, you're just basically using 3, 5, and then 1 or 2, depending, to go up and down over it. And then the transparent flesh is just meant to be basically a glaze that you can then smooth everything out with. Okay. Oh boy. I need to catch up. All right, Dragon Lord 557 was wondering if you had advice or a video for painting the skin for Slaanesh demons, specifically for an exalted keeper. No, I don't think I've recorded my like demon painting skin in a video. But my answer is yes. It's a very complicated tone, I think, to do like the that sort of white skin of Slaanesh demons. I don't really like any of the simple ways to do it. My advice is to find a nice white gray you like, a nice mid gray, a nice purple, and a nice pure white, and you build it using that. So you can construct it then in whatever way you normally like to do your flesh. By that, what I mean is, like, let's say you're a base coat, wash, layer up highlights kind of person. Then I would my purplish tone would be like the purple wash. I would pick some kind of gray skin, gray purple skin. I know that GW has a couple of these colors. I don't know what they are because I don't use GW paints, but I would use that as my base coat. I would wash it in purple, and then I would layer back up with like some of the more purpley gray in the shadows, up to the gray white being the midtone, and then the pure white being added in to be like your very highlights. So that's my best advice. It's a tough sort of skin tone to emulate. If you want to go the extra mile, you need to find yourself like a nice soft crimson color. So like it could be Purple 4 from War Colors. It could be like Bloodfest Crimson from Scale 75, whatever, something like that. And you very, very, very lightly glaze your low to shade color in that red to just bring the hint of life into it. Very, very soft. It'll sort of turn almost pink where it hits the lighter colors. So you want it like really, really light glaze. Okay. What color should I use to Zenithal Prime models? Andrew asks, what color should I use to Zenithal Prime models if I'm going for a red, dark red color like Corn Demons? Dark brown and ivory. You could probably just do it in two-step. But if you want to get more crazy, any dark brown, so like pick a dark flesh tone, and then light rust, and then ivory. And then run red over the top and call it a day. What would you undershade for a blue skin look? Like your undershade your squig with green and yellow. Sure. Well, I wouldn't try to use the contrasting color like there where I used green. Orange isn't going to really bias much. It's just not. It's going to get killed by the blue because blue is such a stronger tone in the way it covers. So I would go into the purple spectrum. So my undershade would be a standard Zenithal black to white. I would then wash the whole thing in purple, say like a a Druchii Violet or whatever, if you want to do that. And then I would do a very light blue tone over it. I pick your poison on your blue, whatever blue you're going for, right? If it was me, I think something like an Amarth blue from Scale 75 would be fun. A War Colors blue glaze would be fun. But, even like a standard blue ultramarine would still work. And then I would just do, again, I would dry brush on a little base white and then again, lightly glaze in blue, same as the technique I did there. And again, job's a good one. Okay. I don't know that I'm gonna go with your second name in there, Felipe, because I'm bad at names. I don't want to butcher your first name. What do you recommend for top coats, especially for true metals? Sure, great question. So for top coats other than metal, I only use AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish. It is my choice amongst choices. This is my new jam. This is the varnish. Now, I use gloss varnish all the time, but for other reasons, like in between steps, not as a top coat. I'll use it to like seal before I do, oil paints on top or oil washes or something. But for an actual top coat, AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, anything less than the best is uncivilized. Now the for true metals, none. I recommend none. That's my answer. Don't varnish them. And don't transport your stuff in foam that's asking it to get scratched. Use mag racks. I haven't varnished a metal in years, and my metals are all sharp as the day they were painted. So that's my best advice. Metal does not take well to varnish and should not be varnished. You are literally ruining exactly the point of what the metal paint is trying to do. So there you go. That's my thought on that. Narcolepsy basically asked the same question. And yes, the exact thing you describe is how I do it. I paint all the matte colors. I use this varnish. Then I paint my metals. Exactly what you just said. Oh, okay. Nick, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Nisason? I don't know. The double edges is funny to me too. Yes, he was talking about that. I think it's hilarious looking. Okay, Crazy Horse, what's your process for Warpstone? Stay tuned for next week and you'll find out. Zektari, says, hello. First of all, thank you for all your content and tutorials. Thank you. What is your opinion on airbrushing in a room without a window or ventilation? I think it's fine. I'm doing it right now. This is a basement. There's a basement window. That's the only window in this place, and that thing does not open and will not open. I don't even want to think about what would happen if I opened that awful window. And because that goes under my deck. So like, ugh, that's super gross up there. I have, I have a booth. I run the fan in the back. I change the filter every so often. Done. Now, I don't spray anything besides acrylics down here. Let me say that. I'm not sure I would do that if I was going to spray like lacquer stuff or enamel stuff or, things that's much more like toxic. I only spray like non-toxic acrylics. By the way, non-toxic doesn't mean it's great for you to breathe, but so like you should still use a mask if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff or if you're concerned. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. I don't usually wear a mask. I wear a mask when I'm priming because it does have a different consistency to it. But when I'm normally painting, I don't wear a mask. I just turn on the fan and go to town. But you do what my recommendation to you would be safe and wear a mask, but whatever. But yes, I certainly don't have a window or any form of ventilation in this room, and it's just fine. Okay. Ben says he was just watching the Shading Real Metal Revisited video that came out today. Good. Thank you. I hope it's interesting. It was a fun one to do. Let's see. Brighton says, can you elaborate on what you don't like about GW edge highlighting? I don't dislike GW edge highlighting. I think it's fine. I don't like the chaos, the Black Legion double edge highlight, where like what I mean is you've got the Black Legion has like the chaos style Baroque extra like brocade around the armor plate, where you have like a Space Marine armor plate, but then everything has a second like layer of gold around it. So they'll edge the gold, and then they'll do a set on the matte paint in the middle. They'll like draw this imaginary edge line. What is creating that color? Like edge highlighting itself is an abstraction from reality, right? Like that's not really how things look. The GW paint scheme is an artistic interpretation. Okay, it's not. They're not attempting realism. That things don't look like that. Okay, like there's no call to realism in the GW standard edge highlighting method. Where they use a in out dark to light method, where the deepest part's the darkest and the most exposed part's the lightest. That's not how light works. But that doesn't matter. Cezanne painted a mountain a bunch of times, and that's not how the mountain looked. He was an impressionist, right? Like, so like art is art. It's not the value of art is not in its mimicking of reality. Okay. So I'm not lambasting it solely on that. I'm just saying I think it looks strange because you have this second line that I can't source. Like in all the other cases when they're drawing these lines on the edges, I understand what it is. It has a symmetry to it. It has a sense to it. There's an edge of a plate. It has been edged. Okay. Your brain, like my brain groks that. When they just create this like second line because I'm like, I don't get it. What's making that? Like it's like staring at an Escher drawing for me. Okay. That's all personal opinion. If like and by the way, is in no way impugning the excellent painters who paint that stuff. The heavy metal team is full of some really, really amazing artists. They have their in-house style. That doesn't mean I have to like everything they do, but it does mean I have to respect their talent because they are some of the best painters around. And I don't want anybody to ever think I think anything different. Everybody in that studio is a fantastic painter, full stop. Okay. I just went to the I'll give it just to drill this into the ground for a second. I just went to the Van Gogh Museum when I was over in Amsterdam a couple weeks back. And I really don't like anything Van Gogh did in the later part of his years, like where he was in an institution. I think it's all not interesting. But his early stuff is gorgeous. Does that mean I think Van Gogh is a bad artist? No. I think he's one of the greatest artists who's ever lived. But that doesn't mean I have to like every piece from him. Okay. Andrew yells, what do you look for when separating the top few armies when judging painting for a tournament? It will always be subjective. What do you personally like to see? Quality. It's the sort of simplest answer. It's usually not that hard, honestly. That is to say, like, what you would imagine. Like, yes, it is subjective, but it's not. But that we use that term like that means it's completely free floating opinion, and that's not true, right? Like I am using my expertise and years of judgment to make an informed subjective decision. So what do I look for? The use of color, the cleanliness of application of the paint, the composition of the pieces, how smooth the paint is applied, how well are the techniques attempted carried off, how good is the basing, how much time did they spend on the total piece, what is the general quality of things they could do that they could have done better. All of these things. I mean, it effectively breaks down into three categories. So when I look for the best, I everything breaks down to three categories: painting, technical, and overall presentation. Right? Painting is just that. It's how well you painted it. Are your strokes clean? Your colors well blended? Are they smooth? Do they have natural transitions where one would expect to see light based on the lighting scheme you've told me you're using? Technical is, is everything clean, mold lines removed? Are the pieces well attached? And, like just everything you would expect. Good conversions fall into the technical category as well. And overall presentation is just that. What's the overall composition of it? How well do you harmonize all of your colors? How well does the army fit together? Does it tell a cohesive story? Like, so yes, it's subjective, but it's not like I just walk up and go, I like that one. I don't like that one. I'm not going boo, yay. Like, so, but that's what I look for. And I'll say it's like when I do it, I actually do rate and score everything on a 1 to 10 scale in those three categories, put the math together, and whoever scores the highest wins. And I make those scores available to people. So like I don't ever want there to be confusion about why I picked a thing. And I generally will try, if there's enough time, I'll try to write a short paragraph on exactly what led to my decisions on the feedback. There's not always time for that, but if there is. Okay. So back onto the black power armor. Would you after that continue to edge highlight the edges which are hit by light? Sure. Again, if that's the style you want to go for. I do think it looks really good on black. I think that is the one case for edge highlighting where it does look quite nice because it does create contrast, and contrast generally sells. So yeah. Let's see. Mark A, dirty ivory armor. Warm zenithal, but then what? I don't think ivory is going to glaze well since it's so opaque. You are correct. Yeah, I mean, the answer is, then maybe nothing. No, I mean, or like you can go a little over heavier on your ivory, and then ideally what you want to glaze is the darker colors, right? Glaze your browns or like your mid-tone interference color if you use like a brown orange or something. If you go back and watch my video on how to paint bone, a lot of the lessons from there will probably apply. But like the idea here would be go a little stronger with your ivory than you would if you were doing a standard zenithal, and then you're only glazing down the transparent brown or brown orange or whatever. Data for the mothership. Hi Vince, how would you achieve a dappled sunlight effect? I figured that a modified zenithal would be a good place to start. Do you think a stencil would help for larger models? I think I know what you mean. Do you mean like somebody? Sunlight. I'm actually going to look up an example of this so I can. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, you mean like somebody standing under the canopy? Yes. Okay, that's what I thought you're implying. Somebody standing under the canopy of a forest. Wow. Are you doing a diorama? Where you have actual trees there above it? My answer is I wouldn't do it. This is one of those things that like I have seen one of the better artists around do this, and it looks weird. Because like, and this was on a bust at a relatively decent scale. And, like in the explanation, they said like I was trying to capture it under a canopy. And when I like sort of turned my head sideways, I went, oh, okay. Okay. I can see that. Right. And this is like a very, very, very talented artist who spent a lot of time on this one thing, and it still didn't really sell. My answer is don't. Like some things just aren't going to sell, man. Now, if you were doing a whole diorama and you actually had the trees and you were going to paint the light there, sure, that'd sell. Like then you could do it. And sure, then I would just paint the light. I would just paint just that, do just that. Like use yellow and use shadow and, make it in this weird sort of randomy, jigsaw-y pattern. But yeah, if I was just doing the minis by themselves, it's going to look like you have a weird camouflage. Like that's what's going to happen. It'll look like, especially if there's skin, it'll just look like the person's wearing weird camouflage all over themselves. Okay. Kador wants some more videos on war colors. Sure. Like I said, I'll do the flesh one. Surprisingly enough, with the lead up to Adepticon and trying to get my pieces ready for Crystal Brush, plus also trying to get pieces ready for Warhammer Fest and Golden Demon in May, plus getting everything ready for teaching. It's been a busy time. Okay. Mr. Plums, have a lot of problems with war colors as well. 2 charges. Okay, that's fine. I'll do another video on it. Maybe I'll focus on especially like if I do using the flesh set, we'll talk about how to make a glaze because that's an essential component. FSD Draconis says he sometimes uses a shot glass to mix more difficult colors before going into the airbrush. Yeah, sure, it's a good idea. Nothing wrong with that. Hey Vince, for Vallejo metal colors, do you use the recommended gloss black surface primer? No, I just use primer. I've never used a special primer ever. Most of it's just going over Zenithal. I use like a glossy black primer for like the skeletons of Night Titans because that's all metal and it's going to be all steel except for like 4 tubes and glass. Okay. What do you use for pin washing on gold? I forgot to write. Oh, Emily asks. I have a document for this. I don't know how it didn't get shared from the class yet. I got to remind Kat on that to share that out because I sent her a document with pictures and stuff. But the answer is pin washing on gold. Same dark thing as always. I use Payne's Gray. It's just the easy one. It's nice blue-black. Works great as a shadow in gold. Gold is warm, hence cold shadows. It's the way to go. A little Payne's Gray, little flow improver in your rock. Okay, Sebastian Weiss. Hi, Vince. Another airbrushing question here. Do you use scale 75 colors with your airbrush? Yes, all the time. Anything special to know here because of the gel medium? How do you thin it? Any tips and tricks? Sure. Thin it like any other paint. Yes, I do. I use it all the time through my airbrush. And the answer is I go about 5 or 6 to 1 with thinner medium to paint, just standard Vallejo thinner medium, airbrush thinner. And like usually I'll put a drop or 2 of water in. So it's like it'd be like 6-1-1, like or 5-1-1 probably. So 5 drops of thinner to 1 drop of paint and 1 drop of water, and then I just mix it up a lot. So the paint goes in last there, by the by, from what I said earlier. Because remember, our thinner goes in our airbrush first if we're going to be bad and mix in the pot. So yeah, but other than that, no. Just I keep a crappy brush next to my, like this thing's just some old crappy brush that I keep next to my airbrush, and I use it to just mix it up and stir it up in there. Then I backflow it, and we're off to the races. Lana Del Rey style. Okay. Let's see. Michael says, I feel that I'm at a point I can work for commission. I feel confident with my work. Any advice? By the way, hello from Alaska. Hi. Your state is very beautiful. I've only had the good fortune to visit Alaska once, but I loved it. Yeah, so sure. What is my advice for commission? What people actually want with commission is paint more than quality usually. They want it on time to whatever level they specified. So don't try to do more than what you promised. People don't generally, like, that is to say, most of the time when people are commissioning an army, what they actually want is that army painted. If they could get it painted tomorrow and sacrifice some level of quality, they would most of the time do it. So make sure my best advice for commission painting is 1, Make sure you set the level of quality very clearly and upfront and have agreement from it. 2, do not do anything just verbally. Have contracts. Even simpler boilerplate of like, this is what you're agreeing to for this amount of money. This is what happens. Protect yourself. Okay. Setting a contract that like if they don't pay you, they can do things like there are terms like they will abandon their army to you is a very important thing to contractually write into the contract and then have them sign, because that is the difference between theft and legal recovery of your losses. Okay. So have a clear set level of quality, get the person to agree to it, have them sign something, and then meet your deadlines. Don't overcommit to things you can't do. Don't try to like under promise, over deliver every time. If you think it's going to take you 4 weeks, tell the client 6 and do it in 4. They will come back to you, because if you tell them 4 and it takes 6, they're not coming back. Right? Assume your life will get in the way and account for that. Don't give the rosiest estimates on everything. You know, tomorrow your brother could end up, walking out in the street and getting hit by a car or something, and then you got to spend a day or 2 in the hospital. Like that's a nightmare situation. But my point is like life happens, right? So build yourself in some time to account for these things. So there you go. That's my best advice. Okay. Kelly says, Vince, since skin seems to be a theme at the moment, would you give some basic differences in painting a male face and a female face? Do you tend to render less on a female to get smoother looks? No, I've heard a lot of people talk about differences between the two. I'm not sure that usually the difference comes out in the sculpt. You're not usually needing to craft that from nothing. I mean, there are like female faces are usually a bit softer. They tend to be less angled just or like have sharp points in the way that they're modeled. So like, but at the same time, if you've ever watched a contouring video on makeup, which by the way, if you want to learn how to paint female faces, I would recommend you go watch contouring videos on YouTube. There's about 1 million of them. And they're just doing it in real time. They're literally showing you what an idealized female face looks like. It's pretty great. And they will show you how you can use paint. Like the contour people are wizards. They will blow your mind with what they can achieve with paint, because they will suddenly go from like having no cheekbones or low cheekbones to super high cheekbones, change the entire look and sort of structure of their face through nothing more than the careful application of highlight and shadow. And you can do that too on your minis, because they're using just, basically raw pigment. But at any rate, no, I mean, I tend to use more color in female faces, I think, in like, that is to say, I tend to have more like pink tones and, rosy cheeks and eyeshadow, lipstick, stuff like that. Even if I'm not using like makeup, I still tend to add more color to female faces. That being said, like male faces, obviously you can do things like 5 o'clock shadows. So you work a lot more blue tones down here in male faces than you do in female faces. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, like you tend to express more color in the red tone in female and blue tone in male. But there still should be red in male cheeks. I got little, redness in my cheeks there. Okay. Aviad says, have to drop a question and run, but was wondering if you have any advice on how to avoid a muddy look when blending with oils, playing around with them a lot and struggling to keep high contrast. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to do to get that sort of thing. The trick is you need to make sure your brush is emptied in between. So when you're blending things in, don't over oil the small surface. Remember, a little bit goes a long way with oils. Make sure you're very much wiping your brush, cleaning it regularly. Make sure you're pulling in the right direction. So like brush control and brush directionality matters a lot with oils. My best advice is go watch, go watch people paint on canvas with oil. You could start now and not finish until the end of time with what's on YouTube right now. So there's plenty of people doing it, and like watch how they get sharp edges and colors, right? And how they apply it. generally it's a smaller amount that's applied thickly and then pulled down into the color, but not pushed back up into. Okay. Reflex Dog Training. That's a pretty great name. Been building painting Skaven since acquiring 10K in models. Okay. Got about 1,800 ready, and I'm staring down the barrel of hundreds. Any advice for staging unpainted models so they aren't filling me with guilt? Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, things like that are such a sword of Damocles that hang over your head. When you can see the whole mountain, it seems impossible to climb. When you can only see your next step, it's the easiest thing to take. So yeah, my answer is put the rest of them away. Get out one unit at a time, whatever that is. Work that out. Finish it completely. Put it in your case or on your shelf or whatever. Then get out the next unit. Out of sight, out of mind. Simplest trick in the world, but it's absolutely important. Do not keep that crap around in your workspace. It will just sit there and haunt you. And you'll be like, oh, God, I have so much more. I don't want to do this. Whereas if it's just one unit, you're like, oh, I can paint 10 Skaven. And then this project is done. Always set micro goals. If you've watched Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, all you have to do is make it the next 10 seconds. Okay? Don't think about the rest of the day. Think about the next 10 seconds. FSD Draconis, airbrushing primer question. What do you thin your primers with? How much should you thin them or not thin? When I use the Vallejo primer, I use Vallejo thinner, standard airbrush thinner. It is the only thinner I use. I don't use anything else. I don't use other flow things. I don't use other stuff. I use Vallejo airbrush thinner. That's it. It's the only thing I use. Have ever used, other than like maybe a drop of water here or there, as I mentioned. I don't use any other additives. Water's a solvent. Now, I don't thin Badger Steino Res because it doesn't seem to take thinner very well. It seems to be already naturally pre-thinned, and it generally goes through the airbrush without any issue, even the white. So I don't generally add any thinner to it. I've had good luck with that. I don't get tip dry or anything like that. So those are the only two primers I use. Brighton says about not varnishing metals. What about models that are part metal and part natural, like an armored soldier? Do you still varnish the whole thing? Do you varnish nothing? As I said, I paint all the matte colors, varnish, then paint all the metal colors, and do not varnish. Mickey R. Vince, I thought you said you used the Vallejo metal varnish over the metals on your Sisters of Battle Night before you applied the oil wash. Oh, the first time I did it, I did. The second time I did it, and the third time and the fourth time, I did not. I am going to tell you to do it, okay? Because what's going to happen is you're going to be like, I'm going to tell you, you don't need to varnish it. You can put an oil wash right over the top, which you can if you're very careful and you have a super light touch and a soft brush. And you don't work the paint around and you don't get squidgy and you do one confident application and then you let it rest. You won't pull paint up. But if I say that, then what's going to happen is somebody's going to put it on there and start, and then they'll pull paint up and they'll be like, but you said you didn't need to do that. Great. Okay. So it's a do as I say, not as I do thing. Like, look, I'm going to tell you what I think is the safest way to do it because I don't want you coming after me when you peel all the paint off your models. So like the answer is yes, I have used the metal varnish over so I can apply an oil paint to like the skeleton or an oil wash to the skeleton. But I also have not many times, and it will work out fine. The world doesn't end. You don't ruin the paint. It doesn't strip off. Like 2 of those 3 nights plus 1 sitting in that room in progress. There's no varnish applied over that metal. The world did not fall off its axis, but I was very, 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 very careful. If you come to the class with me, I will invite you to do it in the way you are most comfortable with when we do the skeleton. Okay. What, Jose? What did you ask before that you were following up there on, man? You can't just hit me with another sentence. I'm answering like 500 questions. I don't remember everyone's previous thing. All right. I don't remember your previous one, Jose. Okay. Thomas Haffenden. What techniques would you use to paint a model that's made up of lots of small different areas of color, such as a Gene Steel or Acolyte hybrid? I would Zenithal it and then paint those areas. I don't know what else to say. Like, I mean, a host of different techniques, all the things that I do to paint in my style. I understand that's a vapid answer, but I don't know how else to answer it. That is to say, like, I would do whatever style I do, as you should do whatever style you do. And in general, that usually means like I start with a zenithal and then I apply a thin glaze of that color to that area to get me started. And then I sort of build contrast from there as appropriate for the level of investment that I want. So, like, with the speed painting an army in a week, I did like a glaze over the top and then like added in another highlight and maybe pulled down a little bit of shadow. Job's a good one, right? If we're talking about like the Skaven that I did for that I'm working on here that I'm doing for competition, you know, it's tons of work and then texturing on top and stuff like that. There's not really one specific way, right? Like again, I tend to prefer things like for lots of different stuff like that, just starting thinner and working from there. You know, like in technique wise, I don't know, anything and everything you can. I'll glaze, I'd loaded brush, I'd wet blend, I'd do whatever I felt was appropriate for that sort of mix and space. And part of that's hard to answer because it's all paint dependent, color dependent, project dependent. It's just something that comes sort of with time, right? Where you know, given the paint you're using, how they act. Like it's hard to one of the things you do learn in working for a long time. Like one of the biggest things you can build with experience is just how your paints act, understanding what mixes, what doesn't, what thins, what doesn't, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. Would the Vallejo metal color varnish work? I think people are asking me about varnishing the metal still. No, I don't like it. Even that I think is still bad. That's why I don't varnish metals. I don't know what to tell you. That's as simple as I can get it, folks. I think it makes them look bad and not like metal because it ruins the natural shine, especially after you've applied sort of inks and shadow and gotten control of your light. To then apply some varnish that re-evens out all the good work you've done is not great. So you know, use a mag rack. If you don't want to buy a mag rack, go buy a $6 Tupperware thing from any big box store and a $2 cookie sheet and stick that cookie sheet in the bottom of that Tupperware thing and put all your minis onto that cookie sheet. That is how I have moved my armies for years and never had a problem. There you go. Rust Belt Blacksmith. Vince, how would you approach speed painting Night Hunt if you wanted them to have black cloaks? I don't have a fine enough airbrush or likely skill to do the ghostly parts after the black end. Well, I think you have enough skill. We're talking base to simplest here. How would I do it? I'd reverse Zenithal. Do it in reverse. And then spray a little gray back on top to kind of lighten up their top. So I'd prime them in white, then gray, then black from above. Then I'd retouch the center. Like they tend to have like hunched backs on their cloak. I'd put a little gray right here, glaze in a color. You can do it with your airbrush. I'm sure you can. I know you can. You can do that. And then I would just glaze over a color and whatever the midtone is on the ghosty parts. Easy. Like night ghosts are like the easiest speed paint, especially with an airbrush. They're like, that's a, if there's ever another army in a week video, boy, might that be it. So that would be my advice. Think reverse Zenithal because you're trying to get the bottoms to be the spooky ghost trailing effects. Yalia, what advice would you give to a total beginner? I watched a lot of your videos, and while amazing content, the amount is overwhelming, and I don't know where to start. I should really make like a course out of those. I might split up those playlists at some point in time in the future to make like courses. What advice would I give you? Sure. Okay, total beginner. One, don't judge yourself against what you see anybody else do. Period. End of story. Ever. Uncle Adam made a video on this just this last week. I agree with him completely. Follow what Ernest Hemingway says. You should only judge there's no honor in proving yourself better than another, but only in better than your past self, to paraphrase, right? So only judge against your past work. Watch and absorb and try things. My best advice is start painting minis. Paint a lot. Paint as much as you can. Paint more. Be unhappy with what you paint and then try again. The first step to being good at something is to be pretty bad at it, and then to be okay at it, and then to think you're better at it than you are, then to realize you're not very good at it again, and then to slowly start to get real good. That's sort of the nature of how learning curves work, right? But my best advice is focus on working with your paint and thinning it and work on your brush control. That's really your being able to properly thin your paint to the level you want it thinned at and being able to properly use your brush. Those are truly the two foundational things of miniature painting. Once you've got those down, everything else is just an engineering problem. Okay. So that's my best advice. And always paint stuff you think looks cool. And that you think you'd be passionate about. All right. All right, Crazy Horse. If I have a grayish purple skin, but the skin has a boil, what color should I paint the boils? Probably still red. Probably still like crimson red to red white, something like that. It's going to read right. And it will be fine. Like bright red, pink looks good with purple. No issue. Okay. Jeremy says, I asked about cave style bases in your squig video and you responded that you make a video about it. But is there any quick tips you can let out before? Sure. So like with cave style bases, just as I said in there, like think about what would occur in caves: broken rocks, mushrooms, stalagmites, crystals, cracks in the ground, puddles, little piles of dirt, sand, like all this stuff would occur in caves. Go nuts. Like there's a million different spider webs, little animals, little tiny lizards, insects. I can probably keep going. Like this miniature right here, you can't really see her. She's kind of hidden behind this one. She's actually in a cave. Like I painted the whole thing with a top. And then the only source of light is her glowing sword. And everything else is kind of in shadowed. But like that's a display piece for competition. Like if you can't put a top on miniatures for armies, right? So my best advice is just, like any of that stuff. Make your base full of any of that stuff and stick to like a blue, gray, purple-ish spectrum with greeny pops and highlights. Everything should feel kind of cold and kind of washed out, and that'll get you your cave feeling is my best advice. Okay. K4T, another question. If I Zenithal and base coat a model, apply all the base colors, how would I finish that model without edge highlighting? Do I have a video from start to finish? I mean, you would finish it by just taking it to high contrast. Sure, many of my videos, right? Like think of how I have finished anything. Like look at the way that I do any of the techniques where I take something to done. So sometimes I will use edge highlighting. So for example, anytime I do NMM or TMM, I generally edge highlight because light gathers along the edge of metals. But when it comes to like cloth, I mean, you tell me if the edge of that shirt has a defined light line on it. Probably not. Is there a bright white line down the front of my collar? Probably not. Right? So the point is that like you can finish it with edge highlighting, or you can just finish it by you take the whole contrast. You have highlights and shadows, and it is what it is. Like you just run the plates, as it were, and you don't edge. So it's kind of up to you. I think any of those things would work. Zektari, another question. For a beginner with limited skills, will airbrushing have any purpose beyond zenithal highlighting base coating? What other usages are there? I mean, for a beginner with limited skills, that's where you'd want to start. Zenithal highlighting and, base coating is a pretty good place to start. Will there be other uses? Sure. I mean, every time you paint a vehicle or big wings or big monsters, you'll do a nice, even, smooth base coat in seconds as opposed to hours. I'd say that's a pretty big delta. Like, I paint big monsters all the time. I love painting big monsters because I can get in crazy with the airbrush and do all sorts of nutso work, right? Or vehicles and stuff like that. Whereas to do that with a brush is just a nightmare. So yes, I would call it still highly valuable. I mean, most of my Zinch army I did, which is like all in there, right? Most of that was done with like probably a G23 or something. That's fine. And just working on stuff like that, trying to push yourself, try to do highlights or something like that every so often. And slowly push your skills. It's a good chance to expand. But the reality is, even if you're just zenithaling and base coating and using it for bigger bodies or monsters or vehicles, it's a super valuable thing. Mickey R, why is it bad to mix paints in the airbrush pot? Just because if you don't put the thinner in first, and as soon as you can get thick paint down in there, and it can get cloggy on the sides, and you're putting a brush down in there near your very sensitive needle, you could bend something if you're not careful. All those things. Brett, question. I'm thinking of starting to compete in painting competitions, but there are not many in my local area. Do you know of any online ones to start with? Just use our old friend Google. I mean, sure, there's lots of online ones, some which are very, very serious. The Evier Metal Facebook group runs a very serious, very big painting competition. The Weird, is it Weird? Or no, not Weird. Maybe it is. Who does it? P3? I don't know. Somebody does Iron Painter. If you look up the Iron Painter, I don't remember who does it. I've never competed in it, but the Iron Painter is like a very long, very serious painting competition online. But I mean, yeah, like those are two that I know of off the top of my head. Lots of communities have pay their own painting competitions. I would also check out your local area, see what's actually around. Try going to a convention every so often and competing. If you can, if you can make the trip somewhere. Like a lot of local GW stores will do stuff like Armies on Parade. So if you happen to have a store in like a not too terrible radius, that could be a good chance to go. All those things. Tebow, hey Vince, I think I have trouble with my lights making my paints dry way too quickly on my wet palette, forming a sort of crust from the top. Any similar issue? If not, how do you set up your lights and still see clearly? Yeah, I haven't had that issue. So I use a bunch of lights, Tebow, and they're pointed away from my painting area. I use extremely bright balanced lights. I have one balanced blue, like daylight blue, and one balanced but these are high wattage bulbs, but light balanced into one is slightly more blue and one is slightly more yellow, and they're pointed at the white walls behind me right now, like straight ahead, away from my painting area. So it reflects, and I'm getting diffuse light. And then I have an OT light right here that I keep to the side and just keep up to sort of flood the area with light. That's how I do it. So I don't have anything like directly over my wet palette, which is right here. You can't see it, but my wet palette's right here. And then the light sits here. And I paint right here. So hopefully that helps. All right. Vince, which paints have you used that do not separate on a wet palette? It varies. Everything acts differently. Depends on the water, depends on the paper, depends on the humidity in your area. Some are more prone to it than others. Gel medium stuff will generally hold together pretty well, but everything can get over flooded. It depends how much water you have. Pro acryl, most of the colors hold together really well, and I can keep using them over and over again. Watercolor scale and pro acryl are all pretty good about not turning insane for the most part, but there is variation in their color to color, because it's not like we think of paint lines as like this homogeneous thing, like, oh, it's Vallejo, so that's mixed like Vallejo paint, but that's not accurate. Like, different additives are mixed. There's different chemistry to every color because the nature of the pigment used and what had to be used to stabilize that and to get that mix and so on and so forth. So some colors will just break up, and they will just tend to do that, and there's not much you can do about it. So it's kind of just an experimentation thing. But in general, I've had better luck with with those that I mentioned. Yeah. You'd have to be crazy to redo a skeleton horde. I don't know. And you can speed paint skeletons pretty fast. Depends on why you're wanting to redo it, I suppose. All right. Oh, good. I've almost caught up to the end, and that's good because we've gone a little over our hour. So now we're going to go into lightning round, do about 5 more minutes. So if you have a final question, drop it in now. I was good. I actually caught up to the end pretty fast. Okay. So here we go. About 5 minutes left, and then I got to call it a day. But we'll try to answer everything we can. Here we go. Steve Newman, you're absolutely welcome, sir, and thank you very much. Abraxas, Vince, nice reference. I'm trying to make a patina for Sigmar armor. I want it to look worn or well used, but not rusted. Any tips? Silver or gold armor? Answer me real quick, and I'll give you an answer to it because it makes a difference. Hive Mind 3006. Hey, Vince, just wondering if you have any intentions to try out the new paints from Chimera Colors. The pure pigment ones, I'm going to try. Like, I have a bunch of new paints I want to try out and test. Probably eventually, if I can pick some up somewhere. Maybe if I can get some when I'm over in the UK easier. I'd really not like. I do have some of the scale color acrylics coming. So I'll be giving those a try. I'd like to try the Chimera ones, but I just haven't had a chance yet. Eventually, yes. Okay. Mickey R. Okay, cool. Yep. Yes, I have. Adam Bow, hey Vince. Oh, there you go. Okay, so he has some questions. All right, so I'll come back to you, Adam. So Abraxas gold. So you want to weather gold. Well, gold doesn't weather. Gold doesn't have patinas. Like if it's true gold, gold is always gold. Gold can get weathered by stuff attaching to it, but gold does not oxidize. Gold is a stable element. It does not oxidize. It does not change. It is always gold. That is why it's an interesting element that we value so much. Now, that being said, who cares? So the answer is sure. Like if you wanted some interesting patina stuff, yeah, like push towards your shadows with different colors. So instead of using standard colors, mix in like greens and nilics and blues into your shadows and stipple them. Like do stipple stuff into your shadows. So like literally use the video I just posted today and do that with some like blue or purple or greens and stuff like that. And make it look like, and so it like, and just kind of stipple it in back and forth with the gold. See, and use it to create kind of your shadows in those recessed areas and around bolts and stuff. And I think you'll get a really interesting, cool effect out of that. And you can still have like some silver in the highlights and things like that. And I think that would look great. Because in the end, art always wins over realism, as I said earlier. So I think that would be how I'd play it. Besides, the armor's not really made of gold. It's made of like Sigmarite or some nonsense, some imaginary metal. So who knows what that does? Adam Bow, how do you highlight and shade over white Zenithal? Highlight and shade. You mean like, okay, there you go. He explains. Meaning after Zenithal, you have white on top. So how to highlight and shade before or after glazing. I'm still not sure I understand. Like, yes, I have white on top. Are you saying you're trying to paint a white surface? If I'm trying to paint a white surface with my Zenithal, I don't highlight anymore. It's already white. White is white. But that being said, your white of your Zenithal is rarely true white. It's almost always going to be gray. You can almost always go brighter because white that comes out of your airbrush has to spray forever to approach true white because it's been atomized and spread out so thinly. So in general, I'll shade down into a color, into some kind of whatever I want my shade to be, and then I'll sort of like I'll glaze down into that color, and then I'll reapply a stronger white, and then glaze down a little more over the midtone. Let's see. And there we go. That's it. This thus endeth the questions. Tell you what, if somebody pops one more in, I'll answer one more question if somebody drops it in. There you go. That was really good. Boy, today I was on the ball. Normally I belabor these points way too long, and I'm sure I did that again today. Okay, Adam Bow. No. When you glaze color over white, all the recesses are not visible. Oh, how to pick them up. Oh, okay. I understand your question now. You shouldn't be covering your recesses completely. If you are, you're spraying your white too strongly. Don't do it and make sure you keep your white rotating. Now, sometimes you'll still get some recesses because they're at the exact right angle that they will get covered. So in that case, yeah, I just work a shadow back down into them, like blue black. Just do some pin washing. I have a video on doing black lining or pin washing, but that's what I do, where I push a shade down into them very darkly and hit around the recess. So just re-pick them out is the short answer. Does that answer your question? Hopefully so. Okay. Oh, the cabinets are from IKEA. I don't know the name of them, but if you look, I mean, like, they're IKEA. If you go look in cabinets, both of these have the same name. They're the same cabinet. They're just different styles. I love them. They're relatively airtight. I mean, obviously they're not sealed or something, but they get like they sit there for years and very little dust is inside. And then do I undercoat yellow with brown? Yes, and flesh tone and ivory and whatever. Or something like that. Okay, there we go. Thus endeth the questions. So thank you very much, everybody, for asking so many great questions. That was fun. I hope I answered all of them. I hope this all made sense. I know some of this can be tough because, like, we're talking in theory and I'm not demoing it, so I know that can make it somewhat hard. But thank you all for coming along with me. Okay, good. I did answer Adam's question. Awesome. Wonderful. So thank you very much, everybody, for all your great questions. I certainly appreciated you taking the time to hang out with me here for an hour or so and ask them all. We always do these in the middle of every month. I try to do it on the weekend. This one got announced a little late. It'll usually one of the 2 middle weekends of the month, and it'll usually be between like noon and 6 p.m. is when I'll try to do this. So there you go. So we'll see you again in April. But as always, I appreciate you watching this one. Have a fantastic rest of your day wherever you are. And we'll see you next time.